My name's Tim. I'm an alcoholic. Very glad to be here. Um, if anything I say is helpful, wonderful. If it's not, don't worry about it. There are lots of different people in recovery. People do things in different ways, and that's fine. There isn't a right and wrong per se. There's the way I did it and the results I got. Um, so, if you weren't here for the last three steps, here's a bit of a recap. Um, what the first three steps tell me is that if I ever drink or use again, I literally may never stop. But left to my own devices, I will use again, which leaves me with a problem. Fortunately, step two, other people have found a solution to that problem. They know how they got from A to B, which is the steps. And in step three, I make a decision to put the course of my life in the hands of, well, AA really. The higher power is behind it. But from a practical point of view, um, the AA program takes care of me from morning to night. So you start off in the morning saying to the higher power, please direct my thinking. You go through the day trying to do God's will, and you go to bed saying, well, thank you, and bye bye, see you tomorrow, to the higher power. So that daily program, well, it holds the whole of my day. What is my life? But it's made up of days. Now, you could say, well, it, you take the first three steps, you put your life into the hands of the higher power, Maras, Kushti. You're done now, good. Just get on with it. Spend the rest of your life, just do God's will. Just be nice to people, Um, look after yourself, look after other people, go to work, work when you're at work, all of those basic things. Now, all that is true. That's 10, 11, and 12. But there are 6 steps in between. So the question is, why are they even there? Why don't we just get on with the business of being good or nice or whatever it is that we think we're supposed to do on behalf of the higher power? And it's because there are a few blocks. There are blocks to me being useful in the world, and certainly blocks to me being happy and contented. If I'm not happy and contented, I'm of no use. Um, if you are of delicate disposition, then uh, uh, block your ears for a few seconds. I was in a meeting in Glasgow a few years ago where an elderly lady, she said, "You're of no use to anyone else if you're in a CUNT of a state yourself." So this was this grand old lady of Glasgow's view of things, and I think she's absolutely right. Um, uh, if I'm miserable, I'm just not going to do steps 10, 11, and 12. I'll go and find relief for the misery. So there are internal blocks, there are external blocks. Also, it talks about in step 11, uh, working out with your higher power what the right thing to do is. Trouble is, if there's a lot of noise in my head, I can't tell what the right thing to do is. All I know is I'm upset, angry, or raging, and I want to retaliate or something. So the blocks in the way, I've got a little list of them here. There's resentment. That's when I'm upset about the past or the present. Fear. That's when I'm upset about the future. Guilt or shame. That's when I'm upset about me. There's a few more problems. Ongoing conduct that harms other people. Secrets. Trying to handle stuff on my own, so not letting other people in to give their view on how to handle things. Character defects. If you don't know what a character defect is, a definition which helps me is a character defect is any belief or thinking pattern or behavior pattern which does not help You can put a moral, you can say it's a moral thing, and it may well be. But from a practical point of view, if the belief, the thinking, the behavior doesn't help me or anyone else, it's a defect. If it helps, it's not a defect. If you're going to be useful, I don't know about what your drinking and using and whatever elsing was like, but I had no one left I could call when I got into recovery. There was no one who wanted to take a call from me. I remember the first night I went to a meeting. I got home, I wanted to tell someone, and the only person I could find to call was someone I hadn't spoken to in 2 years because I'd caused problems with literally everyone else in my life. And so step 9 is there to remove those blocks between me and other people. And also, again, I don't know about you, but I've spent a lot of my life driven by things. I haven't got time to do the right thing or a good thing because I'm driven. I've either been driven to get money or sex or romance or approval or attention or respect or obedience or a job or a career or somewhere to live or a better place to live or a bit of this or a bit of that or a bit of the other, but something. Driven, driven, driven. And what I've learned is that being driven comes from unresolved stuff deep down within. I'm not going to be able to do steps 10, 11, and 12 unless that stuff is gotten out of the way. So we've got 6 steps and we've got, well, not many minutes. So I'm going to try and race through them as best I can. There's a brilliant description of step 4. If you want to know where we are in the big book, we're currently at the bottom of page 63, and we're going to run through to top of 88 roughly. So that's 25 pages worth of material, and it's very dense. But the best description, I think, of step 4 is this: a strenuous effort as action to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which have been blocking us. Now, I think that's very helpful because a lot of people, I certainly felt very guilty and ashamed and embarrassed about the way I thought and the way I had treated people and was still treating people. What this tells me is my defects of character, the things that are wrong in me or wrong in my past, they are not me. They're the things I'm going to get rid of. I'm still left as me at the end of it. I was taught by the people around me when I grew up what to believe, what to think, and what to do. Everything that I did, I learned from someone else. It wasn't who I am. If the same baby had been placed somewhere else, I'd have believed differently, I'd have thought differently, I'd have behaved differently. Why? Because different people would have surrounded me. So the stuff I'm looking for in step 4 is not me. It's what I've been believing, thinking, and doing. That's super important. If you think it's you, you're going to struggle to look at it. If you treat it like, I don't know, you're a carpenter and you've just been using the wrong tools, you're really glad to get rid of those tools because they haven't been working. Don Pritz talks about if you tell a kid to go to his room, take a big black bin bag and put in all the toys, all the things which don't work, which are broken, and just round them all up, and we'll take them out, we'll throw them out, and we'll go to Toys R Us, and we'll get a whole load of new toys. The kid will race to do it. And that's what we're doing in here, in step 4, is we're racing to find all of the crap that we want to get rid of. Bob B, I think, talks about we're like giant magnets which have been dragged through the junkyard of life, collecting all of this crap, and you mistake yourself for all the crap which is glued to you because you're a magnet. And the purpose of steps 4 through 9 is to demagnetize yourself so all the crap falls off and you're left with who you really are, which he said is a lamp. You're there just to be love and joy and light and peace and all of those things. So there's no cause for, I mean, you probably, if you're like me, you will feel ashamed about stuff. It's unavoidable. But to go into it knowing that that shame, in a sense, is misplaced, that what we're aiming for in step 4 is a neutral fact-finding and fact-facing process. There's an episode, I think it's in season either 6 or 7 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where she ends up talking to one of the vampires that she's fighting, and she's getting really sensitive. They were both in Psych 101 or something, and he starts to psychoanalyze her, and he said, "Don't worry, I'm not here to judge you, I'm here to kill you." And she's relieved, of course. And it's like that, you talking to your ego. You're not here to judge your ego, you're here to get rid of it. And you're not here to judge yourself, you're here to get rid of what stands in the way. So the overall structure of step 4, you've basically got 3 inventories: a resentment inventory, a fear inventory, and a so-called sex inventory. Now, the resentment inventory, this does 2 things. First of all, it answers the question, why am I so unhappy? And then on page 67, you get to look at all sorts of situations and say, basically, where have I been wrong in my beliefs, my thinking, and my behavior? And there are 8 questions to pull out the answers to that. But here's the important thing. The important thing is, why am I so unhappy? Now, the way I felt when I got to AA was this. You did stuff and I felt bad. And it's like, boom, just suddenly. Someone said, life is fired at you at point blank range. So whatever it is that is happening, it feels like my emotion is a reaction to what is going on. And that's actually not entirely true. Because the thing is, have you ever been at a group conscience meeting or a business meeting, and you talk to 10 people afterwards, and each of them feels completely different about the group conscience meeting? This means it's not the group conscience meeting which is making anyone feel a particular thing, it's how they are processing it. So my emotions, my negative emotions, do not come from the events of the world. They come from my reaction to it. And the first part of the resentment inventory, the 3 columns, aims to identify, why am I reacting to things the way I am? And the first column is the name of the person or the situation which appears to be causing the problem. The second column is, what is the fact? What is the situation? What's actually happened? And my favourite example of this was a friend of mine. She won't mind me telling this story, I've asked her. She wrote in her second column, so first column, I'm resentful at, I don't know, Susan. I don't know the name of the person. Second column, she wrote, she's always putting me down. And I said, she's always putting you down. What, like, first thing in the morning, she calls you up, she's putting you down, putting all day long until you go to bed, she's still putting you down, you go to sleep, you wake up the next morning, she's putting you down. No. Okay, so how often is she putting you down? Well, maybe once a week. Okay, so we've now edited the second column. I'm resentful at Susan because she puts me down once a week. And you see how, like, there's a story in there which is now being peeled back? And then we say, oh, who is Susan? Oh, she's my boss. How long has she been doing the job? Oh, 20 years longer than me. Oh, okay. Give me an example of what she's actually doing which you think she's putting you down. Well, we'll be in a work meeting and I'll make a suggestion and she'll make like a counter suggestion. Oh, so she disagrees with you. Okay, good. So now we have a slightly different inventory. I'm resentful at Susan because she disagrees with. I'm resentful at my boss because she disagrees with me once a week. Okay, now we've got some truth in there. We've peeled away the whole narrative. Now we've got the truth. But that's not the reason why um, a person is upset. And I identify with this. I don't like being disagreed with. I don't like being put down, in other words, disagreed with. And in the third column, I discover the reason I'm upset is not because of what is happening. The reason I'm upset is because I'm comparing what I think is happening to a blueprint for the whole universe that I don't even know is there. I just know when you behave a certain way, I get upset. And the purpose of the third column, the way I've been shown how to do it, is to say those 7 areas of self. You have to check in the book and check with your sponsor because I can't do the full production number here. But personal relations, how do I want this person to treat me? Well, I want everybody to agree with me all the time. Because that's the real, what's going on. It's like there's a little devil in me which is constantly monitoring other people. Is anyone disagreeing with me? Is anyone disagreeing with me? And it's like it's on alert the whole time for someone that says something which disagrees with me. Ambitions. I want to be loved and respected and revered by all of my colleagues. Maybe security is affected. I think if I'm criticized, it means I'm on the way out of the organization, that I'll lose my job. So security, I'm worried about my position, my physical security in the world. I need somewhere to live. I need an income. If people think I'm terrible at my job, then so there's a plan there as well. Pride. I want people to think of me as right, and I'm frightened they think I'm wrong. Self-esteem. I want to be capable at everything I do. I'm scared that my boss is actually right, that I am crap at this, that I don't know what I'm doing here. So behind every resentment is a whole slew of demands in those 7 areas of self. Personal relations, sex relations, that's how I want other people to treat me. Ambitions, that's what I want. The outcomes that I want in my life. Security is the things I think I need. Pocketbooks is my finances. Pride, what I think other people think about me. Self-esteem, what I think about me. Now, this gets me a long way, realizing that I'm not being upset by anything going on in the world. I'm being upset because I'm comparing it against the blueprint, discovering there's a gap. And that blueprint, all of those demands and expectations for how other people behave, it's like this whole field of landmines that I've laid all throughout the world. And as people walk through the landmine field, when they step on a landmine and don't behave the way I want them to, I blow up. They don't blow up, I blow up. And this is a bit of a problem because you've got 2 options. You either get rid of the landmines, which is the demands and the expectations, or you force everyone in the world at all times to behave exactly the way you want them to behave. The second thing doesn't work, by the way, just in case you were tempted to try that. People are really uncooperative. I don't know if you've noticed that. They just won't do what I tell them to do. That they won't change their personalities just because I snap my fingers. So if I'm going to not be upset, I have to change me. Now, on the margins, you can change a few things. You can avoid the assholes and start hanging out with people that just aren't jerks. Okay, that will really help your life. But there's a limit to how much you can change things externally to make yourself more comfortable. The world has a way of getting in, under the door and through the windows and down the chimney. The world will find you. You can't run away from it. So what I've had to do is, first of all, withdraw the demands and say, you know what? If the reason I'm upset is because I have demands, I can be okay whatever is going on, which is an amazing thought. My sponsor's sponsor says, if the reason you're upset is because you haven't got your own way, you can be happy simply by not having your own way. So the demand or the expectation, I can only be happy if all of these demands are met. It's just untrue. The reason I'm unhappy is because I have the demands. And I know this is true because when I was in my first year of recovery, I had no job. I had no useful qualifications. I had a terrible place to live. I mean, it was dry and it was warm, but other than that, it was just awful. I had very few friends. I had no money, but I was in AA and things were kind of motoring and I was fine for chunks of that year. Not all the time. There were bad patches too. There were rough bits. There were undercurrents, but there were times when nothing was going my way except I was sober and I was fine. So the truth is I can be fine under any circumstances. If you hang around AA or CA or whatever, and you see these old timers, dying of cancer and at peace and cheerful and whatever, it's possible to be okay. The way is to drop the demands. Secondly, to withdraw the judgment, this kind of emotional charge attached to other people's bad behavior. And to develop empathy. And there's a bunch of prayers. Once I've written out all the crap, there's a bunch of prayers where I say, okay, so the reason other people are behaving badly is because they're driven by forces beyond their mental control. Do I identify with that? I mean, even when I've been malicious on purpose, and I have a sharp tongue, and a short temper, which is a horrible combination. I think I think more quickly than my conscience. Even when I'm doing that, it's like it feels in the moment like there are forces which are driving me. I had not yet learnt the skill of self-control. I got to recognize that when people are behaving badly, they are cut off from the source of their goodness. I asked my other half once what he thought about resentment. He's not in AA or any fellowship. And he said, it's like putting up an umbrella on a sunny day. You're cutting yourself off. And if these people are resentful or whatever else, spiritually sick, they're cut off from the only alternative to their ego, which is the higher power. So if people are behaving badly, they're running on ego, just like when I am behaving badly, I'm running on ego. Well, I'm gonna hold it against them because they haven't yet been given the opportunity to recover from whatever is up with them. That's not fair. And there's a bunch of prayers, and the simplest one is, God, show me a kindly and tolerant view. And when I consistently pray that prayer, show me a kindly and tolerant view, circumstances happen in my life which challenge my existing beliefs, and I start to see things from other people's point of view. Often people come into my life that show me the different way of looking at things. The next inventory, and there's a bunch of questions on page 67 where you write out your bad behavior, your crappy thinking, your false beliefs, your mistaken thinking, all of that. But there's not a lot that can be said about that. There are lists you can pick from of character defects. Needs to be done. It's not very interesting. It just needs to be done. There's not a lot to say about it. The fear inventory, very simple. You write a list of everything you're frightened of until you can't think of anything else that you're frightened of. There you go. Then it says on page 68, we asked ourselves why we had these fears, and then it gives us an answer. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Now that works on lots of levels. I've never liked receiving help from other people. when I've been studying, I haven't wanted to receive help, and I didn't get as good results as I could have because I wouldn't receive the help. So that's a pretty obvious example. If you try and muddle through the world on your own and won't let people help you, you'll get terrible results. If you get terrible results, you're going to be frightened of continuing to get terrible results. Fine. But there are certain fears where it seems to have nothing to do with my own capability in life. If ever one is upset about, frightened about politics or the environment or society as a whole, it's got nothing to do with, am I relying on myself or am I, getting help from other people? There's something which goes beyond that. And it's very simple, really. Um, if you look around the material world, the material universe, everything is vulnerable. Everything living will eventually cease to live in a physical sense, cease to exist in a physical sense. Everything physical crumbles. Where's the Roman Empire now? Where is the great city of Carthage now? It doesn't exist. What about the Phoenician Empire? None of these things are there. Things decay, things pass. If I'm relying on anything in the material world, including my own body, my circumstances, my accomplishments, if I have accomplishments, my intelligence, if I rely on any of those things, I'm relying on something which is in a process of decay, and I'm going to be frightened. There is nothing which is not vulnerable in the material world. So if I'm going to have any security in my life, two things have to be placed in the hands of my higher power, not in the world and not in me. And those two things are my identity and my purpose. And if who I am, the book Alcoholics Anonymous tells me that we're children of God. Now that's a particular turn of phrase. It may not work for you, that turn of phrase, but my sense of it is, if God is this kind of spirit of the universe and I'm a child of that, I'm made of the same substance. I may happen to be living in or operating in the physical form of my body, but that's just where I am. It's not who I am. And that spirit can't be destroyed. It was never created. It can't be destroyed. It's going to go on forever. Identity. Purpose. What's my job? My job is to be useful, cheerful, and kind, whatever happens. Now, those two things can't be affected by anything outside of me, so they can be relied on. There is nothing anyone can do in the world, let's not name names. There is nothing anyone can do that will get in the way of those. So my reliance has to be on the higher power, and that's the whole answer there. And the sex inventory, if you've got a colourful history, and let me tell you, don't let these mild-mannered appearances deceive you. I have a colourful history. If you wrote out everything you've ever done, if you're like me, you might be there for a while, and you wouldn't necessarily learn very much. I didn't do 10,000 things. I did about 5 things over and over and over and over. So the inventory can be short. It doesn't need, you don't get, at the beginning, the opening credits for The Simpsons, he repeats these lines on the blackboard. You don't get extra marks in inventory for saying the same thing 100 times. Once you've said it, you're done. Once you've got your inventory, if all you do in step 5 is read out every word of your inventory and it takes 47 hours, you've done step 5. But let me offer you an alternative. My step 4 was super repetitive. My step 5, I was told to keep it snappy. So step 5 is to basically tell someone else all of your defects of character and the crappy things you've done. With the crappy things you've done, you can say, I'm a thief, here are two of my best examples. You don't literally need to list every single object you've ever stolen. It's about getting out onto the table in front of someone else. All of the ways in which I behave badly, particularly towards other people, and the specific events I feel ashamed about. And anything I feel ashamed about, that's also the point at which, if anything was done to you, you feel ashamed about, then share that too. Just any source of shame. A good step 5, I think, is somewhere between 40 minutes and an hour. The exact nature of, if it takes longer, fine. But one of the great benefits of a short step 5 when you're really summarizing stuff is you get to walk all the way around your problem in under an hour, and it keeps it down to a manageable size. And then after my first step 5, which was probably about an hour, I don't remember exactly, it was short anyway, I thought, that's the reason I've been so unhappy my whole life? Really? Just that. It's like a simple list of. So if we change those things, I don't need to be happy like all day, every day, forever. One of the dangers of having a step 5, which is like every Sunday for a year, and I know people who've done that, like talk endlessly about each thing. They love it, but to me, it kind of misses the point that you want to be able to walk around the whole thing. Pick someone that's done a step 5. That's one of the top tips. If you've done it out of the big book, pick someone who's done it out of the big book, like pretty much the same method as you. There are some funny people in recovery who, if you've done it differently than you, they will tell you you've done it wrong. You need to redo it. Go back to the beginning. If only you'd asked them in the first place, you wouldn't be in this mess. And can I sponsor you? It's not always the most helpful response. Occasionally that's the right response, but pick someone that's basically done it the same as you. Ask them in advance, hey, are you the sort of person that gives feedback? Because if you don't want feedback, you don't have to have it. So pick someone that's happy just listening to it. There are some people that just don't want to hear feedback at this point. Personally, I think the feedback is helpful, but it doesn't say anywhere that you have to be like pulled apart by the person you're doing the step 5 to. If it helps, great. If it doesn't, don't feel guilty that you haven't submitted yourself to like the kangaroo court of someone else in AA pulling apart your defects of character. Doesn't need to happen. But if you think their input would be helpful, ask for it. It's good to test drive your step 5 person with some other stuff to see if they respond helpfully to your difficulties. A tip I was given many years ago was, if you want to connect with the universe, take your step 5 with a few people. Now, you need to be careful who you pick. You don't just randomly pick people on the bus or at the newcomers meeting. You find a clutch of sane people with their feet on the ground who've been sober a long time. And I found this once I've shared a piece of inventory like 3 times, 4 times, I'm so bored of it. It loses its sting. Sometimes after one person, it still stings. You're like, what if everyone else finds out? But by the time 4 people have like stared at you, bored from you having read out your step 4, that's the great thing when you read out your when you do a step 5, and people just look bored. And it's actually not so much of a big deal. It takes the drama out of it. It separates me from the crap. Step 6. What we're looking at getting rid of, the only 3 levers I can pull in life are what I believe, what I think, and what I do. I can't change how I feel, at least not in any meaningful way. I can, take a mallet to it with a chemical, or certain other behavior patterns will produce a chemical rush. But that's not really changing the emotions, that's just changing the chemistry. Those are the only 3 things I can change: what I believe and what I think and what I do. So if my life and my experience of my life, my emotions are going to change. Those three things have to change. And that's the realization in step 6. I've got to be able to say, maybe I'm wrong. Behavior is the easiest to change out of all of those. You can kind of force yourself for a while. Eventually, the emotions have to, like the insides have to change as well, because you won't be able to keep up a new behavior pattern unless your insides change to match it. But the behavior is the easiest to change. The second easiest thing to change, I think, is the thinking. Now, by thinking, I mean it's what you do with your mind in real time as time progresses. So let me just, give you an example. Can you think of an elephant dancing on top of the Eiffel Tower? Now, hopefully, you now have an image in your minds of an elephant dancing on top of the Eiffel Tower, or maybe under the Eiffel Tower, maybe safer there. So if you've successfully thought of an elephant dancing either on top of or under the Eiffel Tower, you have now proved you can change what you think in real time. That's the answer. That's the answer to thinking. The question now is practicing it. You just got to spend it, just carry on doing that for the rest of your life. Carry on redirecting your thinking to where it's supposed to go. The hard thing is changing your beliefs. My core belief is things are not okay. I'm not okay. You're not okay. It's not okay. It's never been okay. There is no solution. Nothing is. Every day, everything gets a little bit worse. That's my basic programming. That's the basic belief underlying everything. How do you adopt a new belief? You've got to admit the possibility you might be wrong. And then gradually beliefs get changed. By practicing the new idea. You don't argue with the new idea, because the old idea will not like the new idea. Like the bit of my brain that thinks that everything is doom and gloom is not going to be convinced by fancy arguments of little Pollyanna coming on the scene and saying everything is fine, God's in charge, blah, blah, blah. We're not here to convince the ego that it's wrong. I am not my ego. Just imagine you're the decision maker. You know those cartoons with like the devil on one shoulder and like Jiminy Cricket or God or angels or something on the other shoulder, like bad and good. I am not any of those voices in my mind of bad ideas and good ideas, of bad thinking and good thinking. I'm the picker. I am the one that gets to pick between those. So my job is simply to pick the new belief. What is the new belief? I'm fine. You're fine. It's fine. It's always been fine. It's gonna be fine. It's fine. I get to pick that. I don't get to try and convince my ego that that's right. I get to pick it. And the more I apply that to any situation, like when a problem comes up, to say to myself, there is a solution to this. If I can't see it, it's just a matter of time. I can be patient, a solution will show up. The more I apply the truth, the more it seems to me to be true. But where does step 6 come in? I've got to recognize that I'm wrong. If I don't like how I feel, my beliefs are wrong. Whatever evidence there is to the contrary. And that's really hard to admit that you're wrong or might be wrong. Sometimes the best you can say is, I hope I've been wrong. Because if I'm not wrong, I'm really jiggered. So I hope I've been wrong. Show me a different way. Say this to the higher power. Show me a different way. What can I lose by asking? Step 7. So there's some small print in step 7. If you look really closely, you'll see it there. So step 7 seems very nice. We ask God to remove the defects of character. However, here's a great principle that I've learned in AA. God will do for me what I can't do for myself, but God won't do for me what I can do for myself. If I'm consistently late for something because I won't set an alarm clock and get up, God will not buy me an alarm clock. God will not set the alarm clock. God will not swing my great chubby legs out of bed onto the floor at 6 in the morning. I've got to do that. God will not do that for me. And unfortunately, that principle covers an awful lot of stuff. God will not get me to a meeting. I have to get to the meeting. God will not lift the phone for me. I have to lift the phone. Now, where does God come into those? Knowledge of God's will for me and the power to carry that out. So what's the right thing to do? God give me the strength to do it. So God is the ultimate source of those things, but the initiative is mine. So we're given free will. I have to exercise my will in favor of asking God for the right thing, asking other people in AA what's the right thing, asking for the strength. Sometimes I need strength from other people. I need encouragement from other people. So God is relieving all of it, but I got to take the initiative. And God's other role here, if I act right, if I do my best to act right and think right and believe right, eventually my feelings catch up and acting right, believing right and thinking right starts to feel right. And then I'm congruent, then I'm kind of one person. There's a horrible thing when you take step 7 and start to change what you believe, think, and do. It's like a piece of elastic which gets stretched and you feel the tension, and it's just not going to be comfortable. God makes it comfortable over time, but it ain't instant. Steps 8 and 9. When I do step 8, I do it in 3 columns. First column, name of the person. And that's, I get to examine any relationship where there's some kind of difficulty, some kind of tension, some kind of guilt, some kind of shame. I grew up in a funny old household where nothing was anyone's own fault. Like, if I felt bad, it was your fault. If you felt bad, it was my fault. Like, everyone was responsible for everyone else, but no one was responsible for themselves. Lots of blame throwing was going on. So my whole guiltometer, like my measure of should I feel guilty, is totally off. I can be totally stony about behaving badly and feel super guilty about things which are totally fine. So in step 8, what I got to do was to look coldly and clinically at my behavior. Sometimes, and this is a very common one. Let's say you're in a relationship, and sometimes I would feel guilty after having left a relationship because the other person was upset. So first column, what did I do? I left so and so. Second column, what should I have done instead? And this is so important. If what I did was the right thing, even if someone else is upset, there isn't a problem. So sometimes I've stopped sponsoring people. I've said, I can't do this anymore. I wish you well, but I can't do it anymore. And they're furious or they're upset or they're something. Just because someone is upset at how I've acted doesn't mean I've got something wrong. I've got to look at it coldly. Did I do the right thing from a moral point of view or from what's customary in society? If there's a gap between the two, first column, what did I do? Second column, what should I have done instead? If there is a gap between the two, I didn't act right, then it becomes relevant if someone else is upset. And I get to ask, how have they been harmed? How did they suffer emotionally or physically or materially? Did I take their time? Was I a nuisance? Did I inconvenience them? If they felt bad because of my behavior, how would they have felt? I put myself in their shoes, and it's often only I need a higher power to do that, to help me put myself in their shoes and say, how would I have felt if the tables had been turned? And then I'm clear in step 9, I'm apologizing for my wrong action, not for the effect it had on you. The effect it had on you is your responsibility. The action that I took is my responsibility. So there's never any of this, I'm sorry for how you felt. No, because I'm not responsible for how you felt. You're responsible for how you feel. You're responsible for your response. But I am responsible for being malicious or short-tempered or insulting or careless or whatever it is that I was. Step 9. Um, I approach the person with tact consideration. Not everyone wants to be hijacked with a step 9. They really don't. So I contact them and say, hey, I really like to apologize for some stuff. I tell them why I'm approaching them because a lot of people did not want to talk to me until I said I want to apologize. Then they wanted to listen. So don't sidle up to them and say, hey, there's something I want to discuss with you. They'll just run a mile. So tell them why you're contacting them. And then once you've pinned them down, either some people don't want to be seen, some people don't want to be spoken to. You give them the choice. You say, would you like to receive this amend in person or on the phone or on Skype or by letter or by email or whatever, and you give them the choice. It's to mend the relationship with them. And the first thing I do is show tactful consideration by allowing them to set the terms of how this is going to work, rather than launching in with my little expedition. If they won't be seen, I send them a letter. If they're not terribly keen on that, sometimes if they say absolutely don't, you have to obey that. But otherwise, you can send a letter. Say if you don't want to read it, fine, but it's there if you want to read it. I set down exactly what I did wrong. I say, is there anything I can do to set this right? And I'm so sorry for what I did. I apologize for what I did. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying the word sorry. It's all to do with the tone and the context and what else you're packing the amend with. It does use the word sorry in the big book. It does use the word apology at various points as well. The big book also says there are innumerable forms of amend. So if I can't make amend, and directly means to the person, sometimes there are people who are super reactive. If you try and have a conversation with them, they'll start attacking you and diverting onto all sorts of other subjects. And why did you marry so-and-so? And 100 other things. The only way you can get the message across to some people is in writing. Shouldn't be the case, but it is. I don't know if you've known people, you're having a text conversation, they react to something you've said, and you're like, oh my God, they literally have not taken in what I've physically written. It's just immediately triggered something in their mind, and then they reread it, and they say, oh, sorry, I completely misread that. I still misread stuff. So this is why some amends are best put in writing, because they can reread it 50 times and give it to someone and say, hey, what does this jerk mean here? And then if all they've got to go on is what they recall of what you said on the phone, they're not even playing with a full deck of cards because they will not remember it accurately. So there are lots of different ways to do this. It's not a cookie cutter exercise, but what I would say is get it done quickly. None of this, there's something in the 12 and 12 where it says there are people you say, well, in God's time. I'll tell a little story. Some of you will have heard this. A rabbi wants to get his coat mended. So he goes to this tailor and says, will you mend my coat? And the tailor says, God willing, it will be mended by tomorrow. The rabbi comes back the next day and says, is my coat ready? He says, I'm afraid not. All sorts of things happen, but God willing, it will be ready for you tomorrow. The rabbi comes back a third day, says, is my coat ready? The tailor says, it's not, but God willing, it'll be done by this afternoon. And the rabbi said, this time, what if we leave God out of it? So with step 8, with step 8 and 9, in God's time, how about if I put it in my hands? Do I have the telephone number? Do I know what I did wrong? Am I clear that it was wrong? Have I talked through the wording with someone? If so, do it now. Why not? You could get it done by 7 p.m. and then you'd be done. This thing which has been hanging over you for 30 years. I mean, maybe if you haven't run it past someone else, run it past someone else. But you get the point. When I was 15 years sober, I went through the steps very, very thoroughly. Dotted the I's and crossed the T's, and I found, I think, between 70 and 80 people that I needed to make amends for. Some had never made the first step 8 list, some it had been botched, some I'd wheedled out of, not maliciously, I just was talking to the wrong people in AA who gave me license not to make certain amends. Other people I'd been terrible to since I'd been sober. And I was super willing, and I got through the list and dealt with it in 9 days. The effect of this was, and I'll finish on this, and this is a good segue into step 10 next week. In step 10, it says we've entered the world of the spirit. When I completed the last amend, I went for a run and said to my higher power, if there's anyone else I need to make amends to, show me. And I had a piece of paper and a pencil with me. No names came. And I went to a meeting that evening, and for the first time in my life, I appreciated there were actual other human beings in the room. This was at 15 years sober. It was like I could literally feel their presence in a way that I'd never done before. Not fully. There was a fundamental change, and that's the world of the spirit when I suddenly connected with the world around me. And from that position, if there's nothing wrong with you fundamentally, and you're aware of that, there's nothing to compensate for. Lots of the other plans and designs for how your life is going to get structured just fall away because you can't be bothered. And you're like, God, just give me some stuff to do. I'm fine. Since I'm here, give me some stuff to do. And that's what 10, 11, and 12 are about. So I'm going to stop there. Thanks for listening.